All right. Well, good morning, everyone. I am recording this, so let's keep our foul language to a minimum. So this presentation was put out by Florida Realtors. When I watched their video a little over a week and a half ago, it's an hour and a half long. They put a lot of fluff into it. This presentation has 50 slides. I'm going to try and get through it as fast as I can. It's a lot of legal crap, which I know is like as exciting as it gets, but this is really important stuff. Understanding this contract. And again, the biggest changes in the contract as we get to is paragraph 8B, which is the financing clause in the as-is contract, which again, we work with Matt Weaver's team. The as-is clause literally was rewritten for Matt Weaver's approach to the business. So again, without further ado, let's get right into this. They ultimately the Realtors Association and the Florida Bar update these contracts based on things that have been happening over the last few years. So some of these changes were designed to fix issues with the way they were written in the original contract. Others are done more just to clarify. So as you see, as we go through these things, again, this is a website where you can go through and again, see all of this, see all the changes. You can also download the presentation and watch theirs if you like to. But this is the place where you can go. If you don't get it off of the screen here, you can get it from me. Next, these are the documents that have been changed. The big one, obviously, for us is the as-is residential contract, which we use. Also the residential contract for sale. We don't typically use this as much. I know in some cases there are some places where people like to use it. I remember in the Matt Weaver event, the woman who does all the cash deals in Broken Sound, they prefer that contract. And they prefer it because the landlord is, or excuse me, the owner is on the hook to make repairs in this one, in the second one. We don't do it. We do an as-is purchase. The buyer, it's literally buyer beware. So the buyer has all the rights to go in and do whatever inspections are necessary unless they waive them through the contract. So we like to use this one. I will touch on a couple of the other ones. They have made changes to some of the riders. Let me see the FHA, VA. So this one especially, FHA and VA, they've changed this one. It's now one form instead of it being a FHA form and a VA form. They're all on one. Also notice the contracts all now end in the number 6. So that again is how you know that you're using the current ones. I have updated all the templates in .loop. So if you are to start a transaction, a buying transaction, and you click buying template, the new contract forms are already there. So you'll be able to work with them from there. All right, let's dig right in. I'm going to skip over that. Again, the objectives are to identify the changes and explain the revisions. So I will tell you, hour and 27 minutes. I'm going to do this in 45 minutes. I'm going to try and cut the fluff out of it. All right, let's get right down to the first change. Paragraph 1D. I'll do it right off of here. It might be just as easy. 1D, they have changed some of the language. These are this is the personal property that unless you line it out, this is the property that is included with the purchase. And notice they've added things like thermostats, door, unless excluded in paragraph 1 by other terms of the following items, which are owned by the seller and existing on the property at the date of the initial offer, are included with the purchase. Thermostat, doorbells, television wall mounts, television mounting, mailbox keys, storm protection items. So these items were not there before. They've added them. Again, they're trying to incorporate smart home devices. They're putting these things on there. And again, if somebody says, hell no, I want my Ring doorbell, I'm not selling that with the house. Okay, well, that needs to get lined out. That goes into paragraph E on the as-is contract. So the item that they removed from here is intercom, because as you know, intercoms are very, come on. People aren't putting intercoms in their houses anymore, but all the new smart technologies are, again, designed with the intention of catching up with all the smart technology. All right, any questions? Next, paragraph 4, closing. So this one, I actually have a little bit of trouble describing how these changes, oh, I lost my stuff. How these changes are ultimately affecting everyone. Because they get into the definitions, which are deeper into the contract paragraph. So they mention the standard S. And what it gets, the bottom line is that all of the monies need to be collected by the closing agent for the closing to occur, not accrued to the seller. So let me see if I can find it in my notes here. Paragraph 4. This is slide number. All right. So I'm going to read it from the transcript. Hopefully it doesn't make you fall asleep. Moving on to the next change. Now we say blah, 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 blah. All right. This is the paragraph we've been using all along, which said that the closing will occur when the closing agent is furnished and the documents are all in the closing bag. Okay. Okay. Literally, this is a transcript. So some of the, all right. So that's been the standard. And that's what's in paragraph 18 are the standards. There's a standard I and a standard S, which define everything clearly. We will actually talk about standard S in paragraph 18 later in the presentation. So, the sentence reads, closing of this transaction shall occur when all funds are closing received by closing agent and collected pursuant to standard S. All closing documents required to be furnished by each party are received. So this is one location for buyer and seller to see the closing, requires all the funds to be paid and all the documents to be received. Again, the funds need to be received and collected by the closing agent. And collected, the word collected is defined in standard S as actually deposited finally into the closing agent's account. So now in practice, this is something that comes up. They get a lot of phone calls on it, that the contract requires that those funds from the buyer be received and collected by the closing agent and not the seller. So when they get that call from time to time, we get with sellers. Sellers are ultimately saying, no, it's not closed until we have the funds, and the contract says, no, it is closed when the closing agent has the funds, not when the seller has the funds. So, correct. Right. Well, that's what they clarified it here. They wanted to make sure that that was a clarification, and that's what it's done. It's not, not by the seller. It is by the closing agent written into the contract. All right. Extension of the closing date. So this one is one, again, done for clarification. And it only pertains to one thing. So what it's saying, if, in the event the closing funds from the buyer's lender are not available on the closing date due to CFPB closing disclosure delivery requirements. So if paragraph 8A is checked, loan approval has been obtained, and the lender's underwriting is complete, then the closing shade. So basically, if they've done everything, except, oops, we didn't get the closing disclosure to, they have 3 days to get it. If they haven't done that, this provision automatically will allow for a 7-day extension for them to complete those delivery of the disclosures, only for them to complete the delivery of the disclosures. So again, the 3-day requirement is required. So to meet this paragraph, you have to have your loan approval. The underwriting has to be done. Literally everything has to be done except for the delivery. If anything else is not done, now you go back to a different provision, which is your loan, getting your loan approval and everything else. So if these two are not completed, it falls to a different provision. If they are, this is designed solely for that reason. Questions? Next. This is I have not seen this need to be used yet. The purpose of this is to make sure. So what they're saying in paragraph 6B is that if the property is subject to a lease or occupancy after closing. So the example is you've got a seller, transactions moving along, they're not sure if the transaction is going to close or not. They use this property as a vacation rental or a seasonal rental. So while they're in the process of potentially even buying the home, they say, or selling the home, we're not sure if it's going to sell. They take a lease, a seasonal lease or a vacation rental. So in this, it's saying that if the property is subject to lease or occupancy agreement, so that's why they've just clarified this, after closing and is intended to be rented or occupied by a third party beyond closing. The facts and the terms therefore shall be disclosed in writing by the seller. Bottom line is they have to have all of their information regarding those things need to be provided to the buyer, and everything in writing. So the new language just basically adds seasonal rentals and short-term vacation rentals need to be disclosed as well. So it's already been in there that if you have a lease, you have to disclose it. This basically says if you have a vacation rental, and I mean, I don't know why you wouldn't do that, but that's it. Questions?
Is that physical property or is there other?
That's the physical property. Okay, so assignability. All they've done on this assignability is added this line: if the box is checked, then the buyer may not assign this. If no box is checked, the buyer may not assign this contract. So basically, it puts it at the point of where when you're writing the contract, if you just skip it, it automatically has a default, because before the automatic default would have been it is assignable. So by clarifying this, they basically said the default is not assignable. If you want it to be assignable, you have to check a box. So that is paragraph 7, assignability. If you're following along on a page, it's line 85 that they just added. So if you noticed, all of my presentations, you're going to see the line numbers where these changes are. So if you're having trouble keeping up with me or finding it, that's where you do it. Okay. Paragraph 8A, financing. This one was really easy. They changed the language to say, this is a cash transaction with no financing contingency. All the other language they took out. The other language was really kind of redundant. It basically says, if the buyer wants to get financing, that they can, but that it's not part of our agreement. And guess what? If the buyer wants to get financing, they can still go get financing. They just don't have the financing contingencies built into the contract. So if I've got a, 500 grand, and I want to go buy $1 million house, and I think I'm not going to have any problem, I can call my friend, 500 grand there for the other half, no big deal. I can go in and offer as a cash deal. I'm quite confident that I have no problem getting the rest of my money. I don't need all the protections of the financing contingency. And then again, the other side of this is, hey, I got cash. I don't need all this language to say I'm paying cash. So again, to make things more clear and easier to understand, I think it makes sense to just take all the other stuff out. It was making the paragraph more confusing. So that's paragraph 8A. All right, this is the paragraph that everybody wants to know everything about, because this is where major changes were made, and this is what really affects us. Paragraph 8B is the financing section of the as-is contract. So what they've done is they've changed the number of tasks that need to be accomplished. They now need to be accomplished during the loan approval period. The components of the approval and an appraisal, including valuations, all need to be done during the loan approval process. So it alters the loan approval process and the impact of giving notice. It also adds a seller's access to property related conditions. Okay, I'll get to that as well. So we're going to look at all the subsections of paragraph 8, and there's 6 of them. So we're going to go through each one of them as they are changed. Okay, so 8B itself, they've added, that you have a period of time. The net is the default is 30 days from the effective date to get so that red line is new. The contract is contingent upon within that period of time getting the financing. The language of what type of financing they're going to get has not changed. The loan period doesn't matter, really. Doesn't matter. Do I need to say they're getting a 15-year or a 30-year or a 5-year ARM? Not really. It's not really important. What we need to do is just say, okay, describe the loan period. Wait, I skipped my line. All they've done is they've moved the loan within period line from the top to the before the first point. The second point, all this language has stayed the same till we get to now line 2, that the buyer's mortgage broker or lender having received an appraisal or alternative valuation for the property satisfactory to the lender is either required by the lender, which is sufficient to meet the terms required for the lender to provide financing and buyer to proceed to closing the appraisal. They purposely moved the appraisal into this section because they don't like the fact, and most people who've run into it don't like the fact that they have to wait literally until 2 days before they're expected to close and get an appraisal. The contract was written in such a way that all of the lenders could give you, yeah, you're approved. But what about the appraisal? We'll have the appraisal in a few more days. 2 days before closing, the appraisal comes back and it's 30 grand off. And now the whole deal crashes and burns. The whole idea is, why can't we move that back to the loan approval period and have people know this information earlier on? So as a number of us have been through Matt Weaver presentations, Matt Weaver as part of his process automatically gets your appraisals done early. His whole practice is designed around being able to give you a loan approval in 14 days. Part of the process is the underwriting that he does literally when he does your pre-approval, so that when you're pre-approved with Matt's team, you're actually approved because you've been, for the most part, underwritten. And then he immediately gets appraisals. He will help you structure deals where if you need to go in and say, we're going to waive the appraisal contingency, but we want a 7-day inspection period, he could even get you the appraisal during the 7-day inspection period. And you'll know right there then, are we good or not? 7 to 6, day 6, you get an appraisal. Nope, it doesn't appraise. Crash the deal on the inspection period and forget all about the appraisal contingency. So this change in the contract is going to force all the other lenders to start doing what Matt Weaver's team has already been doing. It really does an excellent job at. So it'll be interesting to see how the other lenders, how quickly they are to adapt to this. My guess is you're going to see a lot of people putting 30 days out there for loan approval. Because now that you have to get the appraisal within the loan approval period, lenders are going to say, well, it's always taken me 25 days to get an appraisal, so I'm just going to tell my customers use 30 days. We go to Matt, we get his opinion on a deal. He can say, give them 20 days, give them 14 days, and it gives you a competitive advantage going into the transaction. So again, this change really has played like right into Matt Weaver's hands, you might say. Okay, so that is the biggest part of the change. And again, we're going to talk about why they made the change. One of the things I wanted to point out is they use the term alternative valuation. So it is not saying that an appraisal is required. What it is saying is an appraisal or an alternative valuation method needs to be completed for your loan approval. So it doesn't require the lender to provide an appraisal. It does require the lender to approve you based on whatever methods they use. Matt even talked about how there are, property histories enough out there on certain homes where he can go into a system and say, we don't even need to get an appraisal on this one. We know enough about the property, we can waive it altogether based on your credit and what we know about the property. That line right there makes that an acceptable method. If they didn't have in there, every deal would require an appraisal. So again, where different loan products and different lenders don't require the appraisal, the contract was written to adjust for that. So that's why it says alternative valuation in that paragraph. Okay, so now we're going to jump to BI, the definition of a loan. And what they've done there is added the language, the buyer of, stop for a second. Buyer shall make an application for financing within 5 days after the effective date and use good faith and diligence and effort to obtain approval of a loan meeting the financing and appraisal terms of paragraph B1 and 2, the loan approval within the loan approval period. Thereafter to close the contract, loan approvals requires the buyer to sell real property and shall not be deemed considered loan approval unless rider V is attached. Okay, so what is rider V? That is the contingency to sell an existing property. So if you attach the rider V to it, then they actually can give you a loan approval subject to your home selling. If you just write it where we'll have the approval without that, you're not going to be able to use the contingency for the sale of a home unless you're using rider V. So all they've done is really kind of clarified this a little bit more, that the loan approval, the financing and satisfactory appraisal are required for the loan approval. And the loan approval, which requires a buyer to sell his property, will be considered a loan approval if they've added that rider V to the sale of the property. And so again, that's kind of just disclosure. Disclosure. So instead of me asking if anybody has questions as I'm going through this, if you have a question, just say, hey, Patrick, stop, I have a question. So, okay. Paragraph BII, buyer shall, upon written request, keep seller and broker fully informed about the status of the buyer's mortgage loan application, loan processing and appraisal and loan approval, including any property related conditions of the loan approval. Buyer authorizes blah, 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 as is appropriate and allowed. Okay, so what this is saying is the paragraph has basically been in here. They've expanded it to include the appraisal and loan approval, and where they're already asking about your loan application and processing. They now want to know a little bit more about that. But the only way they can really get it is if they ask for it in writing. They can't just say, hey, we want this stuff. So it does put in there to make it very clear that if a seller wants to receive this information from the buyer, that it has to be requested in writing. That's really the point of that. All right, BIII, 3 I's. Within the loan approval period, buyer obtains loan approval, buyer shall notify seller of same in writing prior to expiration of the loan approval period. Or if buyer is unable to obtain loan approval, but buyer is satisfied with the buyer's ability to obtain loan approval and proceed to closing, buyer shall deliver written notice to seller confirming the same prior to the expiration of the loan approval period. So what's new about this is the proceeding with the loan approval if the buyer believes he will get approval and close. So exactly. So what it does is it defaults to someone. So if you don't have your loan approval, I mean, the paragraph already in the contract already says you have this period of time to get your loan approval. So this basically makes it very clear that once you have your loan approval, you need to notify the seller that your loan is approved. And if it's not approved in that period of time, you need to notify them that you're canceling the contract, or you automatically go on the premise that the buyer believes they're going to be able to get the financing. And look, they may not have their loan approval in the correct period of time, but they still believe they can get it closed and they still think they can get their financing. The buyer has every right to waive that contingency. This makes it, well, it is automatic, by the way. If you miss your loan approval period without canceling it, it automatically goes to you, the buyer, have agreed to move forward with the transaction and you've waived your financing contingency. So what happens if you can't close? You lose your deposit. Potentially could even get sued, but the reality is most people would in that case lose their deposit and you're going to have one pissed off customer. So, all right, so that's paragraph 8 BII. Again, it's more of a clarification on what happens through the process of loan approval. VIII, again, we're expanding upon the same thing. If buyers unable to receive the loan approval within the approval period or cannot meet the timely meet the terms of the loan approval, all after the exercise of good faith and diligent effort, buyer may terminate the contract by delivering written notice of the termination to the seller prior to the expiration of the loan approval period, whereupon buyer is not in default under the terms of this contract. Buyer shall be refunded the deposit, thereby releasing the buyer and seller from all further obligations under this contract. Clarification. It's really what this, so the paragraph said this before. They've just tried to make it a lot more clear in how they've said it. So the other thing to notice in there is that, you know, the exercise of good faith and diligent effort. So again, could that be a point of contention in the future with a buyer who maybe doesn't, you know, submit all their documents to the loan processor and doesn't do what they're supposed to do to get the loan? Yeah, it could. So it's in there that the buyer has to legitimately attempt to get the loan. If they don't really qualify under this provision. The reality of that is it's kind of hard to know that. So again, terminate the contract if the buyer can't meet the loan approval. It was in it before. They've clarified how they said it. So you want to protect their deposit, pay attention to that clause. Next. 8BV. If the buyer fails to timely deliver any written notice provided in paragraph 8BII or 8 or VIV to seller prior to expiration of the loan approval period, then the buyer shall proceed forward with the contract as though 8A had been checked as of the effective date. So they've changed how they're wording this. What happens is if you don't give the loan approval, if you're not getting the loan approval and you don't cancel it, the contract automatically reverts to 8A, which is a one-line sentence. It says, this is a cash purchase. You're now obligated to that if you didn't terminate under the previous clauses. So if you can't get the loan approval, get your deal. Get your cancellation in. Bottom line, the buyer's silence on loan approval equals cash transaction. So I don't think they can make this stuff more clear. Next, VI. Okay, so this used to be the paragraph that protected us from if we got loan approval and they didn't have the appraisal. So, which was this section 3. So again, they've modified this to make it much more clear. No, basically notice of loan approval was obtained or that a buyer intended to obtain loan approval and close, but no closing, the deposit goes to the seller unless the failure to close is due to the seller's default or property conditions. So the low appraisal no longer resulting in deposit going back at closing, and the appraisal is not a property related condition. So what they've done here is that you can see the red lines on it. The big one isn't the red line. Well, they've added that specifically, property related conditions of the loan approval, specifically excluding the appraisal. But then they lined out this line, which was what always kind of gave us that protection before on the appraisal, that the appraisal of the property obtained by buyers is insufficient, blah, blah, blah. So they've taken that out altogether, and they've specifically lined out an appraisal as not being a loan condition or a property condition. So again, that's just kind of bringing it all full circle on paragraph 8. And like I said, it's taken a lot of language and a lot of changes to it to really get to the bottom line. Loan approval includes an appraisal. If you don't have a loan approval, the deal automatically converts to a cash deal, which doesn't mean you have to pay cash. It just means you lose all of the contingency protections that are written into the contract. So protect your customers, understand this inside and out. All right, so paragraph, now we're getting into this section will run as fast as all the other, the rest of it, the next 30 slides. Paragraph 9, they basically just added changes to FERPTA on line 141. So this affects sellers, if they're a foreign person. It's the only place that accepts them, that they've just added that into what the seller pays. Let's see, let me get paragraph 9 here. So yeah, that just goes into cost to be paid by the seller. So that was a change there. The Miami Regional Provision 9C. This is on line 174. So they added this to make it as crystal clear as it could possibly be. Miami-Dade Broward Regional Provision, buyer shall designate the closing agent. I mean, it's that way before, but it wasn't crystal clearly written in there. So, let's clarify this, make sure everybody knows buyer's paying for it, buyer's selecting it. All right, next. Survey. So again, just instead of putting this all the way out to the title evidence deadline, at least 5 days prior to closing is what they've done to clarify the language. Timing changes. It enables the surveyor to see the work containing needed info and providing more time to complete the survey. So this was just something I think that is an issue that had come up at other closings. So let's clarify this. Let's make it a little easier to get the survey and do it in a timely manner. Next. Well, let's read it. Where's my survey line? At least five. Oh, so, yeah, at least 5 days prior to closing, buyer may at buyer's expense have the real property surveyed and certified by a registered Florida surveyor. If seller has survey covering the real property, a copy shall be furnished to the buyer and closing agent within 5 days of the effective date. So if the seller has a copy of the survey, they're supposed to provide it to the buyer and closing agent within 5 days of signing the transaction. But the buyer may, at the buyer's expense, have a survey done. That's what they've added into that line. That basically they have a 5 day prior to closing to turn all that in. Special assessments. So this is paragraph 9F. So this has to do with assess some regional authorities will not let a owner prepay certain assessments. They have to be paid over time. They don't allow the prepayment of them. So basically it was either you would check A or B. So in the event that you check B, the seller shall pay in full prior to or at the time of closing any assessments allowed by the public body to be prepaid. If the body doesn't allow it to be prepaid for any assessment, which the body does not allow prepayment, option A, this one, will be deemed selected. So what happens is if there's something that they can't prepay, then that particular item will be treated this way. The seller will pay up to the day of close and the buyer will take over the payments after closing. So it gives them an option of saying, okay, well, you got to pay everything, but that one that isn't, it reverts back to this. So it's just that because this was this is something that's come up. It's not a common thing, but it provides for it in the contract. All right, next. Special assessments. This they've added language that any special assessments imposed by special districts pursuant to Chapter 189, that they've added this. So special assessments imposed by special districts will be treated like CDDs where they weren't before. So both will be prorated and specified as in standard K. Standard K is later in our contract. Okay. So it's basically saying special assessments different than those are also going to be treated as those. So I love legal language. Property maintenance. So what they're doing here is saying that except for ordinary wear and tear to casualty loss, seller shall maintain the property, including but not limited to lawn, shrubbery, pool, continuing condition existing as of the effective date. See paragraph 9 for escrow procedures if applicable. So what they're doing is directing us back to the costs that are to be paid by the seller. So if we go back to paragraph 9, costs to be paid by the seller. And they've added this language. If prior to closing, seller is unable to meet the as-is maintenance requirement as required in paragraph 11, a sum of equal to 125% of the estimated costs to meet the as-is maintenance requirement shall be escrowed at closing. So basically the language is already in there. So what do you do if, and I'm very familiar with this one. What if you sell your house that has a huge oak tree in the front yard, so big the 3 people holding hands can't wrap their arms all the way around this tree. And then a week after you sign the contract to sell the house, a lightning storm comes through and blasts that tree, blows half the limbs off of it. Who's responsible for it? The seller is. Seller has to take care of that prior to closing, or if he doesn't, the seller has to escrow an amount of money in paragraph 9 equal to 125% of the sum of the estimates to resolve it. I lived through this. It happened to me. And literally I was in town signing the contract at the real estate office when the storm was going over. And when I got back to my house, a strip of bark this wide had been blown off one side of the tree, and it wasn't going to last. I'm like, that tree's been there for 150 years and now it's dead. So, and I had to pay for it. So in that case, we didn't escrow money, but so in that case, nowadays, it's written into the contract in paragraph 9 how to handle that. Next, paragraph 18, standard F. So here we start getting into definitions and standards. So, you know, we had talked about under standard S, under standard K, under standard I, as we've looked at some of these different provisions, they make these references. So those are in your standards. You can look through and read each one of them because they're all here. So this is basically your definitions section of the contract. So we're going to go all the way to lines 432, 436, 438, where we are defining, which one is this one? Time. Okay, so time is always an interesting one when we're working with these contracts, other than it being of the essence. You have delivery times. So what they've done on this is they've changed this to be a little more clear as far as what days are counted, what days are not. So the example that they used in this presentation was Christmas. Christmas is on the 25th of December. Everybody knows it. It's a Sunday this year. If you have a closing scheduled for Monday, the 26th, odds are the title company's not going to be open on Monday, the 26th. They're going to be closed in observance of Christmas. So this will this clause will automatically move you to the next business day. Previously, this clause said you had until 5 p.m. the next business day. This one does not. You have the entire next business day to perform that transaction. So, and they've done a number of things to sort of clarify this, you know, or a day on which a national legal public holiday is observed because it fell on a Saturday or Sunday shall extend to the next calendar day, which is not a Saturday, a Sunday, or a day which a national legal holiday is observed. This does not affect the time for acceptance or the effective date. Those two dates are etched in stone. There is no, you know, we don't count weekends, we don't count holidays. Those are, you know, if you say you've got 3 days for the effective or 2 days to sign the contract, that you got 48 hours. I don't care if tomorrow is, you know, Christmas and Hanukkah and New Year's all at the same time. It's impossible, I know. But it doesn't matter what that day is. When you write a contract and you say you've got 2 days to either agree or delete or accept or not accept, it's 2 days. It's 3 days. It doesn't matter. Same thing with, you know, well, in the effective date of your contract. The effective date is officially the day after everything has been sold and signed and delivered. That is day 1. Day 0 is the day you're signing everything. So the point of this was to, oh yeah, and there's another part of this that I think is quite important. So again, a clarification on how they handle the days for holidays. This next one, it is also written in here that it is based on where the property is located. So this is, you've got until midnight of a particular day to deliver a cancellation. Let's say you've got a loan approval that ends tomorrow at midnight. So you've got till tomorrow at midnight to deliver it. Well, what if you're in California? You know, midnight is 3 hours later than it is midnight in Florida. So the question isn't where the person is located signing it, it's where the property is located. So for us, everything until Sunday at 2 a.m., everything on this contract is Eastern Daylight Saving Time. Sunday it turns to Eastern Standard Time. That is the time that we use for it because that's where the property is located. So make sense? Next. So, okay, they were using example time. I can skip ahead on this. I've already done it. So force majeure is an interesting concept. It basically says everybody's doing everything right, but because of a lack of services, we can't close. So Florida's the easy example to use of what is force majeure is a hurricane. You know, you've got a closing scheduled on September 15th. On the 10th, there's notification that there's a hurricane headed our way. Everybody starts shutting down, putting up their storm shutters and everything else. You can't be expected to close during that period of time. That event has caused a force majeure. So now you have the right to change the contract because of it. And when I say change the contract, you have the right to move days. But this is all they're doing is explaining what is force majeure and how you are affected by it. Honestly, I'm not a lawyer. Force majeure, I understand that much. So if you get into a force majeure situation, you might want to have somebody talk to. So again, they talk about what it is. It's an event, hurricanes, floods, extreme weather, earthquakes, etc. Civil unrest, government actions or mandates, government shutdowns, epidemics, and pandemics. They've added this to the contract. Again, I can't imagine why. Something happened recently. Maybe, I don't know. All right. And then they added this, that the force majeure event will be deemed to have begun on the first day the effect of the force majeure prevents performance or non-performance. So again, the hurricane one, it's not, it doesn't only count when the wind is blowing and the rain is falling. You know, someone says there's a hurricane coming, we need to prepare. It's the first day of that. The day that everything starts to shut down, that is the first day of your force majeure. So again, they've added this language in there to really make it clear as how this how you are affected by this. Just again, clarification. We're dealing with legal stuff here. So standard K prorations and credits. So again, all they're doing is updating their language here to match what we had back in the changes to which paragraph was that? Oh, paragraph 9F. Nice. So again, they made changes to the legal standards based on the changes that they made. And this is for the special district assessments that'll be prorated and not negotiated. Standard O, very, very important. So first of all, before I get too deep into standard O, I don't know anybody who's delivering their contracts, their signed contracts to their customers through social media or text message. So first of all, if you are, stop. Second of all, it's not a good method to use. So the contract has been changed. They have removed just calling it electronic media. So they've been a little bit more specific that it includes mail, fax, personal delivery, or email. It excludes text, social media posts, or other electronic means that are not email and fax. So if you're delivering a signed contract to your seller, to your buyer, it has to be done through email, it has to be done through fax, or it has to be done through hand delivery. And you know, this is not 2004. I don't know a lot of people who have fax machines anymore, but facsimile is still allowed. So, so again, this is a very important thing. We just got to make sure we're following the rules on that. They have added a couple new disclosures on paragraph 19, which are, you know, listed here. The seasonal vacation rentals, we talked about that, how there's the additional paperwork for seasonal rentals that would be the same as if you had a tenant living in your place. The other one are PACE disclosures. So I think we're about to get into, we'll get back to PACE disclosures in a little bit. So at the bottom of the contract, it used to be you signed if you accepted and you signed if you don't accept. And they just said this is stupid and redundant. So if you submit an offer, if you receive an offer from your seller, you receive an offer, you don't have to sign that you're not accepting the offer. You don't have to do anything. Ignoring it is enough. But if you want to, so they basically took out all this counter offer stuff. And if the seller wants to counter offer, there's one box. Simple. You want to counter offer, check the box and counter offer. But you don't have to go into the rejection of the counter offer rejection. And again, it was too much work, especially in an environment where a seller could get 30 or 40 offers. You know, they're going to accept one of them. Why do they got to go back through and sign 39 of them saying, no, I reject it? So make it simple. So that is the counter offer. It's just been modified. Okay, I'm not going to get deep into these. The regular residential contract, there are a lot of things regarding property inspection and repairs, and it's not quite the same as the as is. Jason, do I even need to get it? Do you ever use it?
No.
All right. So don't use the regular residential contract. I can skip over. They just made a few modifications to that. So they did update some new riders. And again, this one does not affect us. The mold inspection is something for a not as is for the regular contract. So unnecessary for us. This rider DD, the seasonal vacation rental after closing. So again, it's nice how that takes up the whole window. This is designed that if the seller, basically has a vacation rental or a seasonal rental in a property that he's taken, it just needs, this is the disclosure. And it also gives them some ability to decide whether or not they want to use a property management company. If the seller has already agreed to a relationship with them, they have to be given notification of the acceptance, and they have the ability to accept or reject the agreement if they're using a property manager. So again, this is rider DD. If you do run into a situation where you've got a seller who is looking to have, whose property is used as a vacation rental or seasonal rental, it needs to, if they have business lined up for it, they need to disclose this to the buyer, which makes all the sense in the world. So property assessed clean energy. It's been a while since we've had any presentations about PACE. So PACE is a program that municipalities are involved with, where you can get new hurricane windows, you can put in solar panels, you can do things that are designed to be for energy efficiency, renewable energy, wind resistance, etc. So it's designed to do environmental improvements to your home. It's financed through this PACE program, and you make the payments on these with your property taxes. So it's not truly a loan, it's treated more like property tax. However, when you go to sell your house, you have to disclose that you have this, and most mortgage lenders will require the satisfaction or release of the PACE financing before they will approve the property for financing. So if you've got a seller who has a PACE improvements and has this payment, it's a good idea to let them know that they're probably going to have to pay that off at closing, that they're not going to be able to just transfer those payments over to the new owner.
It's lien on the property.
Yeah. Yeah, that the buyer, to get your mortgage, you're not going to be able to get the lien that you need if that lien's in place. So that is the PACE disclosure form. All right, the HOA, the one thing, they didn't put a bunch of changes in here, clarifications, but the big one is right here at the top. That basically the association does or does not require buyer approval. So when you're sending this over for signature, the first line of it says the association's approval of buyer is or is not required. Kind of the most important thing, I think, in all of it. And then they go into the details of, how they pay the assessments. So it's just a clarification of any special assessments that are due and payable in full prior to closing will be paid by seller, as will those special assessments payable installments which are prior to closing. Those that are to be paid in installments after closing remain subject to negotiation. Okay, so what is that part? Additional language to rider A. Oh, so, okay, so they talked a little bit about the condo rider. They've added a little bit of language into the condo rider, but they have not rewritten, and they are not going to rewrite the condo rider right away. Because what was happening is they were going through this and they were literally about to unveil all of their changes. Surfside happened, and they believe, the Florida Bar and the Realtors Association believe there are going to be actual legislative changes that potentially will affect condominiums. So instead of them making a bunch of changes to the condo doc, it made more sense for them to say, let's wait and see what statutory changes are made before we do a revision to the condominium document. So there will be changes to this in the future. They just haven't done it yet. It didn't make sense to do it now because of, what happened in Miami.
What is I, K, and L that say reserved? Is that no?
No, they always have reserved ones on there for use in the future.
What does that mean?
It means that there is no addendum for it right now, But if they want to create an addendum, they have that spot saved for whatever that
Oh.
random addendum may be. It's like a page left blank. All right.
Where's
So
the blank addendum?
what blank
Isn't
addendum?
there just a blank addendum?
You mean, yeah, to amend your,
Yeah.
I'm sure it's still there.
it hasn't changed.
That's a
But,
separate-
but you, but that's not a, it's not a rider, Tina. It's an,
That's-
it's an addendum to the contract. It's not like a rider that you put on there like for HOA or other
Is this
things.
where
We are, actually, I didn't print out the addendums, so we're already past them.
So it's a rider, it's not part of that.
Oh, we don't have it here?
Riders are separate.
Okay,
So this is, you notice that if you look at E on that list of number 19, FHA and VA financing is now one. It was two
Wait.
before. Letter E, 19E.
okay.
So, and they've done just a couple of minor things that, they have, seller shall comply with applicable FHA or VA regulations regarding lender required inspections. They didn't get into termites, roof. It's like, look, the lender has specific inspections that are necessary, so we're not going to detail what those are. And then the cost of the seller for appraisal repairs should not exceed blank, which is a cost in addition to the cost required to be paid by any other provision of this contract. So they've taken out that it's under paragraphs 9, 12, blah, blah, blah. So they deleted the roof, termite inspections, appraisal repairs, and paragraph 12, all to avoid the need to update the rider in the event the requirements of FHA or contract provision references numbers change. That's all. The other part of it was they added a maximum if left blank for the fees. So it's $100. They added a default amount. What was the last one? Okay, and then again, putting in some more, not just defaults. They added a line for a seller to cap any fees VA requires a seller to pay with a default blank that was if it was not completed. That's what they've done here. So they've deleted references to specific fees the seller is required to pay. Seller shall pay all required fees under the VA regulations up to, if left blank, $250. That's it. Where before they had, the WDO inspection, tax service, underwriting, unnecessary, take it all out, all required fees. All right. How did I do time-wise? It took an hour.
Very good. So excuse this stupid question.
Hold on.
Where's our addendums? Right?
yeah.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, let me see if I can figure out how to end this thing now. Stop share. And stop recording.